All right, in this video, we're going to take a look at the harvester file. So go ahead and load up the harvester.mb file. As you can see, I have a little bit of rigging involved. This is actually smooth skinned, and the rig isn't the perfect rig in the world, but it does work. As you can see here, there's different control curves. What we have here is a rotation. There's actually a little bit of a push down here on the wheels using a hidden deformer, which basically allows it to dig in a little bit into the ground, as you can see here. So when I kind of take this little node right here and rotate it, you can see that the ground, it's eating into the ground a little bit, which is nice. The other thing we have here is a crane that we can move up and down, and we have a crane that can open up here. We also have particle systems available, such as smoke. So right now, this is sort of keyframed or scent-driven keyed to an emitter from which we can get smoke plumes. The other thing we can get is tread smoke or dust getting kicked up by the wheels, as you can see here. And all of this is set up properly as far as speed and so forth to have inherent velocity and slowdown, which is nice. And again, this is a compositing DVD. We're not going to get into particles or how we built this. For more of that, you can go into the other E3D tutorials on how to build such devices and so forth. But for this, we're concentrated on live action and CG compositing. As far as the materials are concerned, though, I want to take a look at that. If we were to go ahead and turn off what I have right now as default materials, if I turn that off, you can see everything is really, really dark in here. So, well, why is that? Well, I'm going to go back here and jump into the Hypershade. Let's go ahead and take a look at what I have for the materials themselves. And what you'll find is what I'm trying to do is accomplish something called tone mapping. And what tone mapping does is it allows for a gamma correct of 2.2 or whatever you desire to sort of brighten up and make it more realistic. CG always looks very contrasty, and there's always deep, dark shadows with no details in the shadows. And you can cheat that by having bounced light from different sources such as Final Gather, Global Illumination. But to actually just do an overall gamma adjust in post, you need to bring down the brightness of the textures themselves. So if we go into the texture node, here you can see the bazillions of textures. And if I go ahead and just click on one of these and graph input outputs, you can see I have a gamma correct node on these. And that gamma correct node has a 0.666 setting on here. And the reason being is that later on we will use a certain numerical value, which I'll go into more detail later, for an actual gamma correct by a Mi exposure simple node. And what that does is, basically, to kind of put this in layman's terms, is we darken our textures and then we post brighten them with a gamma correct node. And doing so, we brighten up our shadows, we have soft highlights, and in doing so, it looks more photoreal. We're trying to reach photorealness. And what I mean by photoreal is photographically accurate to what you would see in a camera. You have shadow areas that are in detail. You have highlights that are not just, black and white, but a nice degree of variance and gradients. And all that's done through tone mapping, which we're going to get into much later on. If we go to our outliner, we'll see I have everything nicely organized here. The joints are hidden. Here's the control curves. And I also have a quick select set of all control curves if you want to bring everything back to 0. The trunk is something I usually put in just so that you can, put stuff in there if you have extra additives like explosion particles or something. You can always have something to kind of dump in here. Particle effects, again, are just as you can see here, the exhaust system, the ground dust system, and then sort of the inside rigging. Some of this has been hidden, such as the IK handles and so forth. And that's pretty much it. So what we basically have here is 2 curves for animation. Here's the kind of placement curve, and this one is your beginning animation. So this is just to place your object. This is what you animate the actual motion from. And then these right here are just your variants as far as creating the illusion of suspension and weight and shifting of weight. And we also have little curves right here to do this and that. Again, some of this is smooth skin, so be aware of that. There are limitations. You'll see the rig break if you're not careful. So I have on here all these nice little curves all set up for you to kind of play around with. This is a great example, and I would study it for, as far as texture resolution, an example for if you do your own projects. This is a very large scale scene. If you guys are working in a 32-bit computer, I would highly recommend moving over to a 64-bit computer. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and jump back into our previous scene and take care of pretty much creating offsets. All right, so we're back in scene build underscore 6.mb file, and I'm just going to very quickly just do a play blast of our progress so far. All right, so this is what we get, and as you can see, this is now just an overview for you guys to kind of understand where we're at in the process here. We have two shots that need to be put with their offsets. They shouldn't be playing at the same time. And the other thing we have to do is scale this to an actual harvester. So in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and bring in an actual harvester itself. So to do that, we are not going to import it in, we're going to reference it in. So to do that, we go to File, Reference Editor, and we're going to go ahead and add a reference, which is this little button right here, or Create Reference. And as you can see here, we have a whole bunch to choose from. We're going to choose the harvester, and we're going to choose Reference. And what that does is, it brings in a file, but what's cool is it allows us to go back into the original reference file, which is the harvester.mb file, change colors, change around things, tweak settings, rigging, anything that needs fixing, and then that will propagate over into the actual Maya scene. So as we can already see here, if I just turn off this little check mark, it'll disappear. And we can also, if we made any changes, say with another Maya file open, we can refresh it by coming in here and just saying, under the reference here, reload reference. So if there's any adjustments, say we change the color of the harvester, change some textures, whatever was changed inside the harvester MB file will propagate over to this file right here. So let's take a look at our scale. Obviously we're way off. Now I could scale down the entire harvester, but I'm going to break the rig. So first off, I'm going to go to Use Default Materials. And I'm going to basically put this in the direction that it should be for shot number 1. So I'm going to rotate this around. So we'll go ahead and jump that over to a -180, and I'll put it somewhere in the ballpark for now. We don't know exactly where yet. But as you can see, this thing is just gigantic. If I were to go into the first shot, so we'll go ahead and look through the camera for shot number 1, and I'll just go ahead and hit X-ray on it. You can see this is absolutely ridiculously huge. I'll kind of come around here. So you got like mammoth-sized harvester coming through this scene. So in order to fix this problem, we need to scale down our cameras. Now our cameras supposedly right now are scaled correctly to one another. So what we can do is we can take these two nodes and group them together, and we can call them cameras. And again, we can go ahead and choose the pivot point. We can always change this again and again and again. We can change the pivot point of the cameras themselves. So what would I want to do that? Well, I can just hit Insert, and I'll just take my snap to point, and I'm going to make sure it's still snapped to the ground plane. We still know this as the ground. It's parallel to the actual grid. So I'm going to find a place right here where I can do this. Probably like right here would be good. So now as I can take this, I can start scaling this up or down. In this case, I want to scale it up. So I'll just start scaling this scene up like so. So what's happening through our camera? Let's take a look. Here's the scene. I'll just start scaling it. As you can see, as we scale up the cameras, the harvester starts to get smaller and smaller. In fact, while we're at this, why don't we go ahead and hide the first camera. Smaller and smaller. If you want to, you can just kind of key these in yourself. So you can do 5, 6. That's looking a little small. We're going to find out right now. I kind of just perusing the scene a little bit. And I think I'm going to go ahead and move him forward a little bit. So again, I'm just placing him with the placement node. That's the whole purpose of the placement node itself. So I'll go ahead and take that and just move it forward a little bit. And let me make sure I have my snap to point off. All right, so let's take a look at our scene here as we kind of peruse through it. Why don't I go ahead and hide this? This is a common glitch inside of Maya. Even though something is there, if it's animated, you kind of have to just put it under its own layer. So I'll just go ahead and create another layer here, and I'll call it Actors. We'll go ahead and just assign that and get rid of it. That way we don't have to see it. So it looks decent here. I want to see how it looks in the second shot. So the reason why we haven't done our offset yet, as far as the frames, is because I want to see what it looks like in both cameras to be properly scaled. Now we know right now that the camera 1, camera 2 are scaled properly together, supposedly. So we're going to jump over to camera 2, and we'll turn that one on. In fact, while I'm at this, I might as well start naming this. So I'll call this cam 1, and I'll call this cam 2. And I might as well take this puppy, put him under actors. So you can see the ground plane kind of makes sense here a little bit. So let's go ahead and take that same harvester and bring it over. So I'll go ahead in my perspective. And one other thing I can also do is I can reference in another harvester, which in this case probably would be better. So I'll come under my file, reference editor, and we're going to bring in another harvester. So we can keep bringing a million of these, George Lucas style, and make it look like that our product is better than what it is, because we can just make a million of them. And that's no pun against George Lucas. So let's kind of bring this puppy back, and we'll bring him over here. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look through my camera here, camera 2, and start placing this guy. And at this point, the actual harvester is actually going to go over our actor. This is the big dramatic drive over. And that's why I wanted this to be kind of like a really cool dramatic shot. So what I can do is, and you probably want to do this with 2 screens, obviously we're recording with 1, but I'm going to go ahead and squeeze down the top view here and start bringing this where I want it. And at this point, it's probably best to bring in the actors, because the actor is going to kind of give me an idea as far as scale. As we can see here, here's a door, and if I look at the door compared to the actor, we're pretty close. We probably could scale these cameras down a little bit, but I'm not sure yet. So let's go ahead and kind of position this as dramatic as possible. Again, this is called layout. We're just doing a rough layout here. So we can choose what kind of crazy angle we're going to go for. In this case, I was going for something a little bit to the side. So if this is our typical 6 to 7 foot tall character, and he's about there, that probably means that we need to scale this up a little bit. Hence, we need to do something with our camera scale, our camera group. So I'm taking the camera group. Again, you can come in here and adjust the scale of these if they're off, each one to itself. But I think we're pretty close. I'm going to take the camera group itself and scale that. So this time, I'm going to take the pivot point of the camera's node, and I'm going to place it somewhere a little bit closer here, a little closer to home. So I'm going to snap that puppy right there. Again, making sure I stay on the playing field as far as what is the ground. And I want to kind of use these little controls to kind of get close to my actor here, and then hit insert. So with that, everything will scale from this direction. This gets a little confusing, but once you get a hang of it, you'll start to understand it a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and start scaling this. What I'm doing is I'm scaling the cameras down, making the harvester bigger. So let's take a look. I'll go ahead and turn off X-ray real quick. And you can see how my actor is starting to look smaller and smaller. And I think we're probably about right there is a good scale. So that's looking pretty good. Now we always want to double check by going back to camera 1. So I'll go back to camera 1 and switch over cameras. And let's go ahead and hit X-ray. How's the scale looking here? Oh, it's looking pretty good, actually. That's about the scale I want the harvester to be at. It would be that scale. So again, it's just proper understanding and proper planning as far as orientation and scale and so forth will get you where you want to go. So I'm going to go ahead and save this as 7, and then we're going to go on to what I would like to call offsets of frames. So I'll go ahead and save this as 7. Okay, now we're going to change the offset. We know that there's 142 frames in shot 1, 341 frames in shot 2, coming to a total of 483 wonderful frames. We want to leave camera 1 at first frame 1, last frame 142. We want to move up camera 2 to 143 as the first shot. And our last frame will be 483. So that'll be the range here. So what we'll do first is set our range. So that'll be 483. So I'll just come in here and say 483. And we'll just kind of pull that all the way out. And if we kind of pull this through, we can see that if we come to frame 140, kind of come through here. And I'm going to go ahead and turn on camera 2 so we see it. By the way, in our outliner, let's do a little organization here. Under cameras, I've got 1 below 2. I'm going to middle mouse drag and put that up. So with that done, I'm going to go ahead and jump into camera 2 and grab the camera, which we locked off the actual frames with. And I'm going to grab the graph editor and hit F. And here is all the XYZ translate rotates of that camera. Even though it's locked, we can still grab and play with them inside the graph editor. So I'm going to go ahead and drag them like this and grab all the keys. I'm going to make sure I'm on the translate button here. And I'm going to kind of move to frame 143 here. I know that's the beginning. And I'll just show you that. 142 is the official last frame of shot 1. And we want the first frame of shot 2 to start right there. So what I'm going to do is, with that selected, I'm going to go ahead and hold down the shift key and hold down the middle mouse button. It's going to be a question mark. Where do you want to go? And I'm going to drag my mouse left and right. It's going to lock me to the horizontal. I can't go up or down with this, which is very important. And I'm just going to drag this in the rough area of front 143, and now I'm going to zoom in as best I can here. Do it again, shift, middle mouse drag, left and right. And I want to get it right on the money. So if I look at this now, I'll kind of play it through. We're still in trouble here. Now why is that? Well, it's because we have to change the actual offset inside of the actual image plane. For this right here. The camera's correct, but the image plane isn't. So we have to grab the camera itself, and under the plane itself, there's a little offset here. And what we're going to do is we're going to set that to negative 143. Okay. So as you can see, as I kind of play through here, and we get to frame 142, actually, sorry, that should be 142. Sorry. We should see on frame 142, we're switching over. This is the last frame of that cam. And we go to 143, we now have the new cam over here. So we now have a continuity as far as animation if this harvester continue to animate and come over here and continue on in the shot and attack our actor from where he was here. So, for instance, like this harvester, it would kind of keep moving along and make its way across in front of the actor. So this is where just continuity comes into hand. So with that, we can kind of drag this all the way through and see at 143 frames, we are where we are, so to speak. Now, the same thing has to be said for our actor. So here's our actor right here. As you can see, we've got his animation is still wrong. And let's go ahead and take a look. Actually, it's not that actor, it's this actor right here. Here's the keys that we roughly set. They're not any, beginners, but we got to move those as well. So I'm going to go to my graph editor and hit F and frame all those goodies. Grab it. Make my way back to the golden frame of 143 and hold down Shift, middle mouse drag, left and right, and bring this animation over as well. Again, this is just for reference, this little square moving around. So with that said, let's go ahead and do a play blast of this so you can get a full idea of what's going on here. And I think this is probably far enough. I want to get as much space as possible here. In fact, why don't we go ahead and animate our perspective camera so we can see what's going on. I'll animate this at 1, and at 483, I'll kind of come over here and show that. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and just kind of play it through, and I'll just do a quick play blast. All right, I went ahead and saved this as build 8. Now let's go ahead and play the play blast here, and you can kind of get an idea what's going on from these little actors right here. That see how one kind of overlaps the other, and then this actor takes off and makes his way down the scene. So there's a nice, beautiful continuity here, which is good to do some play blasts when you do these offsets, just to see that everything is working correctly. The next thing I want to do is start laying out animation. in a rough animation as far as where these things are, kind of point A to B kind of things, because they are just basically vehicles that roll around. But before I do that, I want to jump back into After Effects and build what I'd like to call sort of a foreground garbage mask for shot number 2. So let's go ahead and jump into that.